And shout out to our listeners, Tarun and Nandini, currently vacationing in Lisbon. Happy birthday, Kandu. We have listeners all over the world who enjoy our shows.
Nice.
So, hope you guys are ready for this. Well, to begin, let me quote a short poem that I think describes the situation. The smeared and spattered sunlight, this dark stained dawn, this is not the dawn that we were waiting for. This is not the dawn that my comrades and I, arm in arm, had set out towards. Through the night sky desert, we had set sail for the stars, but now in this ocean of darkness, we seek the shore, where we may finally disembark from our ship of sorrow and experience that dawn of liberty once more. This is a translation of the poem Subh-e-Azadi, The Dawn of Liberty, written by the great Urdu poet Faiz Ahmad Faiz on the eve of India's independence in 1947. And in it, he describes the betrayal, the loss that he felt when the freedom that he and his fellow activists had fought for being torn asunder by the bloodstained horror of partition as Pakistan was carved out of British India. And I always think about this poem when I think about the 1979 revolution in Iran. You see, in the 1970s, Iran was the most modern nation in Asia outside Japan. The revolutionaries who fought for freedom back then were looking to overthrow the Shah and his brutal secret service, the Savak, and install a democratic regime much like similar revolutions that happened in South Korea and Taiwan. And instead what they got is a brutal regime that has oppressed the people of Iran for 4 decades right now. But Iran is an ancient nation. And by the way, coming from an Indian, that means something. Its language and culture have dominated capitals from Delhi to Cairo to Istanbul for centuries, and its poetry is possibly the most exquisite in the world. And the soul of this great nation cannot be suppressed. In Cox Populi, this segment, we've always argued that if democracy is going to survive in the 21st century, we have to care about each other. Not just states. States have their own interests, but the people. And if there's any revolution I want you guys to pay attention to, it's this one happening right now in Iran. What's being widely described as the world's first feminist revolution. And to help us with that, we have Nasim Raisi, aka Naz. Naz, is that your rap name or?
Yeah,
No.
well, why not?
Well, we'll get into that, yeah. Representing feminista.berlin. This is an incredible organization. I think you've organized in the past 4 months or so, and they've been responsible for a lot of protests and sit-downs and happening in Berlin. And she's going to help us understand what's going on in Iran right now. So, Naz, welcome to Cox Radio.
Thank you for having me.
So, just to get started, you grew up in Iran, 23 years or so, right?
Yes.
Why don't you help our listeners understand what it's like growing up in the Islamic Republic of Iran with the regime that's still in place? So, what was that like?
Well, to be honest, when you live over there and when you're under the suppression, you never understand it until you get out of the country or until you're in the free world and you understand, okay, something that is normal for me is not normal for everyone. Mm-hmm. And that's what was happening to me. And it hit me in the face the first time that I got out of the country for traveling with my parents. And I was looking at all the other people, what was normal for them was like absolutely a culture shock for me. For example, when I was 9 years old, I started to wear a headscarf because I had to. I mean, even earlier, at the age of 7, when I started school, I had to wear the headscarf when going to school. Right. And maybe this is also funny for you to know, but in Iran, the schools are separated. So girls go to a separate school from boys. Mm-hmm. And then I think our first trip was to Istanbul. And then I saw, okay, there are people who are wearing headscarf. There are people who aren't wearing headscarf. I saw my mom, who was also a bit hesitant. Should I wear it? Should I not wear it? Do I have the freedom? Like, I want to go back to the country. What will happen to me? And yeah, it hit me in the face. Like, wow, okay, girls and boys go to the same school. I have to wear a headscarf when I go to school.
That's intense. Yeah, I mean,
it is intense. Yeah, for a 7-year-old girl. Yeah, I think
it reminds me of the first time I ate beef. It was in Italy actually, and I was so scared. But it's not. It's so different in India because you have. I mean, all Asian countries have like these deep religions and traditions. Yes, but I mean, Iran right now is a little different. And that's very interesting about the headscarf, right? Because that sort of is or seems to be the focus of the issue right now. I just want listeners to understand that it's not like just a nun's habit or something with like a lightly draped shawl over one's head. It's a tight wrapped thing, and your hair is not supposed to stick out even a little bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, if Well, to be honest, there is never a clear rule for it, like how you should dress. And I think because of that, people can get arrested. So because there is no rule, they can like, okay, I feel like, okay, you're not dressing properly, so I will take you with me to the police station, and you have to like, I don't know, sign some papers and promise that you will not do it again and you will dress properly.
Right, right. So the uncertainty also lets
Exactly.
corrupt authorities,
Yes.
take advantage of that situation.
Yeah.
So, we're hearing about the brutality of the regime, and we'll get into that in a minute. But growing up, did you or anyone you know experience some of this brutality, or some of these, people being bundled up into vans? People. I also have like an incident from a friend of mine, but I want to hear your stories.
Yeah,
first.
sure. Another thing that is completely normal in Iran, but not outside of Iran, is that if you're on the street, for example, me as a girl, I'm on the street with a boy who is not related to me. Again, the morality police can take both of us away. And sometimes I have friends who were forced to get married just because they were seen on the street.
To get married.
Exactly, yeah. And that happened to me. When I was 21, I guess. I was out there with one of my friends from university. He was a boy. We were just walking down the street, and then the morality police came to us and was like, "Are you two related?" I said, "No." And he said, "What are you doing on the street together?" And I said, "Well, we're just walking like down the street, having a chat." And he was like, "Okay, you need to come with us." And
God.
well, yeah, I mean, it was even like talking about it and remembering all those scenes. My heart is now
Of
also
course, yeah,
racing,
yeah.
and I was like, "Okay, what will my father think? Like, what will he do? Like, imagine the police calling you and telling you that, okay, we have your daughter because she was on the street with another boy." And then my dad would be like, "Okay, who was the boy?" Yeah, so that happened to me, and it is brutal to like just not be able to walk on the street with a boy, with another human being, let's say.
That's just intense. And I mean, I remember a friend of mine. She grew up in Iran as well. She was visiting a city. I think it was Qom or Mashhad. I think one of those two cities.
I studied there.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yeah.
nice. Well, I mean, what's to follow is not so nice. But basically, she was saying she was visiting like a shrine or something, and she'd worn a headscarf, and the headscarf had come loose, as it does from time to time. And apparently, some guy just walked by and like hit her on the back of the head.
Yeah, that happened to me as well.
You're joking.
No, I was
like a stranger, not the police, just strangers.
Yeah, it was a total stranger. I was at the shrine. Again, like my headscarf became a bit loose, and then the guy was like, he was patting me.
Yeah, it's not even seen as something like
Yeah.
violent. It's like, hey, here's a friendly reminder.
Exactly. It's
but
like,
it hurts. Yeah.
Well, pay attention to your headscarf.
So that's crazy. And then, so you spent 23 years and then you came to Germany.
Yes.
And you've been sort of following stuff that goes back.
Of course. I mean, you try to distance yourself, but I guess this is not the case.
Yeah, it's home. You can't do
exactly.
that. And there have been, like coming to the protests, there have been protests before. You know, this isn't the first time. This is the largest, I think, in a long time. But they've happened before and they've become increasingly stronger, is my impression of it.
Yeah.
So what were the protests that happened before this? The Green Revolution, I guess, was one of them, right?
Yeah, you're right. After the Islamic Revolution in 79, there were protests here and there because you mentioned Japan in the beginning, that Iran was one of the modern nations. And actually, I was talking to some of the protesters from like 79, and I was asking, so what was your goal? Why did you do the revolution? And they said, because we wanted to become Japan. We were doing so great, but we realized that, okay, this is a dictatorship. We didn't want that dictatorship. And we saw an improvement. We thought, okay, maybe if the Shah is gone and then we have a democratic nation, then we will be able to become a country like Japan. So that was the goal in the beginning.
And in fact, like we had our last guests were representing Hong Kong and Taiwan to talk about the situation there.
Yes.
And I remember something that a Taiwanese guest said that caught me, because everyone's like, oh, Taiwan's a puppet regime and it's all influenced by the U.S. Everything is influenced by the U.S. apparently. Like it's all. But he said, no, we fought for our freedom. There was a dictator there and they had a revolution and they installed democracy. So this has happened before. I think people think of maybe the Arab Spring or Libya or something, and they worry sometimes about even the 79 experience of Iran, right?
Yes.
And they worry, but this has happened. There's a precedent to this in South Korea and Taiwan. But I think we have to, before we start talking about the current protests, I think it's a good idea to go over the Shah. because and the 1979 revolution.
Yeah.
Now, people, I guess, have a different. We were just talking to someone earlier who compared Shah to Donald Trump, I think, and I mean that's the thing. We like it's hard from an outside perspective to understand how he was, you know. And my impression is completely different. My impression was he was this like modernizer who like stood for women's rights, and you know, like he tried to industrialize the economy. So what was the Shah like, and why did the revolution of '79 happen?
Yeah, I think he was actually a modern person. He was trying to make the country a better place, but under a dictatorship. So people didn't have the freedom of speech back then. And this is what they wanted. So they were like having all those good stuff that Shah gave them, and they wanted more. That's why the revolution happened. And going back to your previous question, so after that revolution, people started to realize that, okay, this Islamic regime is not what we wanted. This is not what we fought for. So that's why protests begin to happen. They were like, okay, no, this is not my choice. We need to like, I don't know, to reform what we have right now. But it was never successful because from the early protests, they started killing people. And then people got scared. They were like, okay, we lost a lot during revolution. We don't want to lose again. And that's why we waited like 40 years. And right now I feel like the time has really come and we are like, okay, enough is enough. We had enough. We have to change and they really have to go because this was not our choice from the very beginning.
Right. And I remember, I don't know how true this is, but I remember there was a Pakistani professor who talked about like Iran when he was following the events from there. And he said a story, I don't know how true this is, but apparently like if they caught you wearing nail polish, on the streets, they had like pots of ants or something. I
wasn't allowed to attend a university class because I was wearing wearing nail polish.
That's intense.
I mean, now I can laugh about them, but at that time it was, of course, brutal. I mean, of course, like my laugh is not because of like happiness. It's
no. I mean, you have to. That's how you deal
like,
with like. I mean, back home, like if you see stupid things, you feel powerless to do anything about them. You have to.
You have to laugh.
Yeah. I mean, so. What I'm trying to like understand is that these the revolution against the Shah was not necessarily it's this brutal Saddam Hussein dictator who like is killing people. It's sort of like he gave people, you know, when same in South Korea and Taiwan, people got wealth, they got middle class, and middle class people have aspirations, and they fought for those aspirations. And it wasn't just, you know, poor people or like, you know, the mullahs or whatever. It was a whole broad section of Iranian society. It was the political parties. It was the Tudeh. It was the communists.
People were educated back then, and that's thanks to him, I would say, because he really fought for education during his time.
Yeah, and I think, from my understanding, it was like the conservative clergy sort of hijacked those protests, much like in 1917 in Russia, where they promised one thing, they promised democratic freedom, and then I think it was Khomeini who flew from Paris, and in Paris he made a bunch of radio broadcasts saying that, hey, don't worry, we're going to have democracy. It's going to be just like an Islamic democracy. And then he came back and he just...
Yeah, I mean, he has so many famous quotes that, I mean, he promised a lot of stuff, but as soon as he got the power, one of his famous quotes is that he said, economics is for donkeys. So imagine a country, people having like revolution, they wanted to become like Japan, and then the leader of that revolution says, economics is for donkeys.
You know, I'm an economist, like I'm developing economist myself. So like if I'm starting to think this Khomeini was a bad guy.
He was, of course.
Okay, so I guess moving on to say the revolutions or the protests that have happened before. You had, I think the Green Revolution was something that kept on coming up in my research. And that's interesting because there was an opposition, right? There was a leader, there was a guy who a group of people who wanted to replace the regime. And what happened in that protest? How did that get taken down?
So
when did this happen as well, if you can?
Well, to be honest, I don't know the exact date because maybe you know this as well, that in Iran we use a different calendar, a slightly different one to year. So sometimes converting the dates for me is a bit difficult.
Oh, sure, yeah.
But
2009 maybe?
Maybe, it was,
10 years ago.
10 years ago, more than that, I guess. But so back then, again, we were a bit like optimistic about what's going to happen in the country. We were like, okay, we still can change them. We can still improve what we have. And again, like empty promises. We saw empty promises and we thought, okay, again, we are weak. We cannot have like another revolution. So let's reform what we have at the moment. And then back then there was this election, and people were really hopeful. They thought that their votes matter. But the result of that election came out, and people were in shock. We were like, okay, what happened? Like, I remember talking to, because at that time I wasn't old enough to vote, but I was talking to my parents and like their friends, and I was sure that okay, that the leader of the like the Green, it wasn't a party, but like
movement.
Yeah. I was sure that a lot of people voted for him, but the result of the election, it was like completely different. So people thought, okay, we should be civilized about it. We should go on the streets and just ask, like, where is my vote? What happened to my vote? But again, as you can like guess, they started killing people. A lot of people. Yeah. And again, we took a step back. We said, okay, we're weak. We cannot, we cannot make them go. Yeah. So maybe we have to stop for a minute. Maybe the time hasn't come yet.
That's what always gets me, because the brutality of it, you know, there are degrees of response, right? Like, I'm not even, like, my government, I'm sure, has done a lot of like shitty things, you know, in the past, but you don't respond to street protests with that kind of violence, with murders, you know. Yeah. I remember recalling an incident where, you know, the Shah wanted to send out his army, and or someone advised the Shah to do so, and he said, look, they're not, the people who are protesting in the street are their family, their relatives. They're not going to shoot at them. So maybe as we transition into this specific incident with Mahsa Amini, can you help me understand who are these people who are shooting at protesters, who are killing protesters, who are like killing these young girls who just are fighting on the streets?
That's actually a question for me too, because I really don't understand their level of brutality. Like, how cold-hearted can you be to just kill someone because you think that she's not wearing a proper hijab, you know? Like, who are you? Who are these people? That's actually a question for all of us, because we cannot understand someone being a human, and again, like, being that cold-hearted.
Yeah. It's not the army, I think, because I think
it's not the army. I mean, to be honest, I don't know, because
it's hard to tell, right?
It's hard to tell, exactly. Yeah.
So
I think it's like a mixture of all the powers that they have, like all the people who are in power. Right.
The IRGC as well, the morality police, who we're going to discuss in a bit more detail. So tell us about this specific incident that started this revolution, this one that's ongoing right now. Mahsa Amini, who was she, and how did it get to here?
She was just a normal girl like me. She was visiting Tehran, which is the capital, with her family, because I think that she got accepted into university, and they were over there to just observe the city, and they were like walking down the street, and then the morality police arrested her.
She wasn't even in the university. She was checking out her university that she just got accepted to.
Yeah, she was just checking out the city, exactly.
Good gracious.
And she was on the street with her brother, and then the morality police came, and she resisted, like, to go into the van with them and like go to the police station. And then her brother also said that, look, we're not from Tehran, like, we are visitors here. And we don't know what happened in between these hours, because there is no evidence, but all of a sudden there was her picture like all over the news that she's in hospital, and she's not conscious, sorry. Yeah, and like hours later they announced that she was dead.
So, not in university, she went to Tehran with her family, you know, to check out the start of her new life. Yeah. And because she was wearing a headscarf.
She was.
But it wasn't tight enough. They bundled her up into a van, and hours later, her parents received a corpse.
Yes.
So, what were the events subsequent to that? How did this boil up into this protest right now?
I can remember when I read the news myself, and I messaged one of my friends who she actually is part of Feminista, and I told her that, okay, enough is enough. Like, I cannot contain my anger anymore, because she was a normal girl, just like you and I. She was walking down the street. She was even wearing a proper hijab, because like, if you look at the girls on the street, you see like different people with different kind of like hijab, and it's very random. You cannot tell if they're gonna arrest you or not. In my opinion, she was actually wearing a proper hijab, and I told my friend that, okay, this time I cannot contain it. Like, we need to do something about it. I don't know what. I don't know what I can do from Berlin, like miles away from the country.
Yeah.
But I think we should all get together and people should really respond to it. And I was just telling this to my friend, and then hours later, I heard that, okay, there is something happening. People are actually going on the streets and they are chanting like for freedom. And then this like chant came out as like woman, life, freedom.
Zan Zindagi Azadi,
Yes,
right?
yeah, correct.
Okay, it's I relate to that feeling because I think I told you before, like even this whole segment started because you're abroad and things are going back in your homeland and there's nothing you can do. You feel so helpless sometimes. And
I did.
Yeah,
I did.
right.
I mean, I got up in the morning. I was like, okay, I have to go to work, but my body is here, but my mind is back at home. I want to be with my people. I want to be on the street with them as well. But well, I can't right now. I mean, if I go back to Iran, they probably will arrest me, and then I will be as powerless as, I mean, maybe here I have more powers. I'm doing this podcast with you. I'm like bringing awareness to everyone. But if I go back home and they arrest me, that will be the end of me, basically.
So when you say, I want to understand the morality police. I think you mentioned them as well. You're saying even people who have headscarves on, they can come and they can sort of just, and I've heard that in the protest, they are now just pulling people's headscarves off.
Yeah.
And there's propaganda going around. This is really funny when you told me about this. Like
Yeah.
that the counter propaganda is that these people want you to be naked on the streets.
Yes.
Like the opposite of, hey, let's not wear a headscarf is nudity in public.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're like, okay, these protesters, they want to be nude on the street. Like, we need to be careful about them. Yeah.
And so the morality police are the ones who enforce this. What else do
Yes.
they do? I mean,
Well, I think this is also part of their job. I'm not sure about it, but so Iran is a Muslim country. There are a lot of Muslims over there, and during Ramadan, there are people who also fast over there. But you are not allowed to drink or eat on the street, and if they see, they can like punish you for it. Basically.
what if you're like dehydrated or something? I mean,
It's not their problem.
good Lord.
Yeah. So.
It's I mean, so many reactions. I mean, it's just like,
yeah, exactly. Like
wow.
even talking about them, it's so right now that I have the experience of living abroad. I feel like, okay, good God, like what is happening over there? Like, who are these people? How are we putting up with them?
And I think it takes tremendous bravery to, I mean, considering, I'm sure you have family and like friends back in Iran still, and you want to go back home someday. And it takes tremendous bravery to sort of do something, even if you're far away, even if you feel like you're powerless. And I think talking about your organization, feminista.berlin, but also the Iranian diaspora. I mean, if I was at the protest last Saturday, and it was magnificent. Like the number of people I was, and they had people were coming in from all over Europe. They had like buses and stuff lined up on the street.
Yes.
So talk about what your organization, like what you're doing, your story, and like how you responded to these events, and maybe connect that to like the wider Iranian diaspora and how they're responding in capitals around the world.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, when these protests started back in Iran, we were like, okay, we need to do, like, we cannot go back to the country. That's for sure. But we are out here. We can be their voice to the free world, and we have some powers to do, I don't know, bigger stuff. So we got together, and then we thought, okay, maybe we need to do like a big action, a giant action that, you know, I think that right now there is enough awareness on the internet because, the internet is not banned in Iran right now, and everyone reads about what's happening in Iran. But we need to, like, gain the attention of politicians, those who matter, those who have a voice, those who can actually make a change. So we thought, okay, what can this action be? Then we were thinking about, like, okay, the options. We were just like brainstorming, and then we thought, okay, we need to do a sit-in in front of the Green Party, because what's happening in Iran is the biggest feminist war or revolution that's happening in the history, and the Green Party claims to be Feminist, the foreign minister, I guess, is also from the Green Party, and she also claims to be a feminist. So we thought, okay, we need to attract their attention, and then we thought, okay, let's do a sit-in, because they have to make a connection with us. They get out of the office, they see us, and they want to know what's happening. And then we started the sitting 3 weeks ago, and it's still ongoing. We are still extending. And during the first and second week, we tried to come up with these different demonstrations and acts, so that we can also attract people on the street, and then let them know that what's happening in Iran, as well as, of course, the politicians.
Right. And have you, what response have you received from both the politicians you want to grab attention of, and from the general public?
When we're there at the sit-in, there are a lot of people who are on the street just passing by, and they're like, oh yeah, we heard about Iran, and then they stop and they try to talk to us and gain more information, and really ask how can we help? How can I help as a German citizen, to your organization, or for what's happening in Iran? And another good thing is that on our second week in the sit-in, we had a good connection with the Green Party politicians. They told us that they hear our voice, and they are actually taking actions, bigger actions. So I think that's a huge milestone for us, because this was one of the stuff that we wanted. We wanted to make this connection. We want them to act, not just, saying that, oh, we stand by people. That's not enough. You have to do something about it, and you have the power I don't have.
Exactly. Please, of course.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
Sure.
It's interesting, everything that you've been, of course, telling us so far. But yeah, I'm interested about the party thing, because actually the German government recently has sealed a deal with Saudi Arabia to sell weaponry, basically, to this country that has a very, I would say, kind of similar situation in terms of rights, women rights, and legislation inside the country, with the Islamic rules and so on. So don't you think it's a bit contradictory and controversial and hypocritical also to tell you, yeah, we're going to support you, and because it's right, because Iran needs to be free and democratic, but at the same time they do business with other countries that have kind of a very similar situation. What's your take on this? Or do you think they what they telling you now? Yeah, we're gonna do something. Is you have to take it for real, promise. Or is it something empty? No. I'm interested about your.
I totally agree with you, and in the beginning I was also a bit skeptical about it. That is it another empty promise or not? But so recently I read that, again, the foreign minister has told that they are considering the deals they have with Iran regarding energy, and because we are going through an energy crisis here in Germany as well. And Iran is one of the providers that they had a deal with, and they're reconsidering those deals. Even if it's an empty promise, that's, again, a huge milestone, even saying it out loud, because I know that this can also be a bit, not necessarily dangerous, but it can be a bit hard for Germans who are facing this energy crisis, and then hearing that, okay, we're reconsidering the deals we have with Iran. So then, I myself as a German citizen, I'm okay, what will happen to me then? What will happen during this winter? But I think this is a price that we have to pay, in the end. I mean, this is what I have in my power, to trust them, to trust their empty promise. And I really, fingers crossed, that it's not an empty promise this time.
And
otherwise,
and
we're
I think
alone.
But that's a thing that I really want to emphasize to our listeners, that in a democratic country, you have the power to make a difference.
Exactly.
Right? In Iran, they can write as many letters as they want. They can go on the streets, but they'll be repressed. They'll be killed. In a democratic country, okay, you have a representative in the Bundestag, right? I know in my country and in parliamentary systems, there's a specific member of parliament for your location. You can write to that person, and he or she has to, raise this issue in parliament if he has enough attention. But just imagine, as a representative of the people, right? You get one letter from a constituent or someone in your area. You get 2, you get 3, 4, 5. After a few letters, you're going to be like, hey, maybe I should look into this.
Exactly.
Maybe I should raise it in, whatever body I'm standing in.
And at least, they have acknowledged what's going on in Iran, because this again might sound funny, but like we all know what's going on in Iran. We all see videos of the protests, but none of the governors in Iran has acknowledged these protests. None of them has even said like a sentence that would be calming for those who are on the streets. They are actually in denial, in my opinion. They're like, oh, okay, I don't know, some foreigners are in the country. They are the ones who are protesting. It's not us Iranians. So imagine like having a governor who's in denial and then hearing another one who is actually, even if it's an empty promise, at least acknowledges what's going on in your country.
Exactly. And that's what I love about, I went to your link tree and I saw that link, which is you have letters in English, German, and in Farsi that you can send to your representatives directly. And that's exactly the kind of action we need, you know?
Yeah.
So our listeners, if you're anywhere in the world you are, you know, go to their site, we'll give out the details and towards the end of the interview, and send this letter, you know, to your representatives.
Yeah.
At most, it might make them interested to look into the issue, you know, and that might have wider consequences. But in democratic regimes, people have to care about each other. Yes. The reason the Ukrainians are being supported right now is because the people of Europe and of America will not let them fall that easily. And if you have that care about people in Iran as well, I'm sure governments will find a way, you know, to support those protests.
I remember seeing this influencer's video who, I'm really bad with names, I'm so sorry, but I saw her videos and she was like, we pay these governors. We are the ones who are giving them money. So you should write letters to them. And it is the same situation in Iran, but I cannot write a letter to a governor who's a representative of me, you know?
Yeah, you're financing the bullets that are being shot back at you.
Exactly.
It's intense.
Oh my God.
Now, I want to deal with one more issue that I've been hearing a lot, and I don't know how to think about this, right? There is a certain hesitancy amongst a lot of people who do care about this issue, who do represent feminist causes and social justice causes. And that's this idea of Islamophobia, right? It is because the thing about the headscarf is so prominent. In fact, there's an issue about the headscarf in India as well, but like we leave that out of it. But the general idea is this is an Islamic custom thing, which some people seem to be opposing. This is the idea that I've heard. And it would be, if you don't have an idea of the culture, it's not our place to criticize this because it might come off as Islamophobic. Now, what do you have to say to that?
Actually, like the headscarf is not part of, I mean, well, there are debates. We always have had this like women who wore the headscarf, but it was not in a Islamic kind of way or like in a Muslim way. It was just like part of their costume, I would say.
I mean, in fact, Parsi women, Zoroastrian women who, in India who fled during the Islamic, the first time Islam came in Iran. Even today, when they go into their fire temples, they wear the headscarf. It's like a traditional thing.
When you go to church, you have to like cover your arms or like, I don't know, not necessarily your hair, but your arms and stuff like that. But I think this, like what is happening in Iran is not Islamophobic at all because I was telling you this before that in Iran, although it's represented as a Muslim country, but we have other religions inside the country, and like in that religions, you should not wear a headscarf. But this is been forced by the government that you have to wear a headscarf. We don't care about your religion. And by the way, you are not allowed to talk about your religion in public
unless you're
Muslim,
unless you're Shia,
yeah,
specifically,
exactly. So this, like, women burning their headscarf is actually like they are burning those forces, those I don't know, like suppressions.
It's a symbol of oppression.
Exactly,
yeah.
It's a symbol of passion, exactly. And you see a lot of photos from Iran right now that women are standing hand in hand. One of them is wearing a headscarf, the other one is not.
Yeah.
And I also saw a lot of Muslim influencers who took their scarves just as in like to show their solidarity with the Iranian woman.
Right.
So I think like if you should not take it as you as a person, you should not take it as a Islamophobic kind of movement. It's not at all like that. We want everyone to be free to be who they want to be, to wear what they want to wear, and we just basically want a free Iran.
Yeah. And it's and I mean these people, this regime, right? I mean, no one's even heard of what they do to the Baha'is, the Balochs, the Kurdish people, how badly they've been treated. You know, this is a regime that I think there's no gray area almost. It's just oppressive. And I think the issue, instead of about a headscarf, it's more like we do not want a bunch of old men who have no investment in our happiness or prosperity forcing us to wear something and using violence
Exactly.
to enforce their vision of society on our bodies.
Exactly.
Right?
I couldn't have used better words.
Oh, thank you. I'm good with words. Anyway, so I think maybe we'll talk as we come to the end of this interview. I think we can talk about the wider geopolitics of this, right? And you know what? Something that's very interesting, right? Because I know a lot of Afghan people. Like we consider them part of South Asia, and like and what happened to them is just horrible, with the Taliban and stuff. And the problem now is
and
that
they're suffering because of the Islamic regime as well, like in Iran as well.
Yeah, it's just brutal,
It is,
I think even if you think about like what Rocco was talking about, like the gas supplies, for instance, right? I want you to consider this, dear politicians and economists who are hearing me. Russia and China right now, what's happening? Now they found Iranian drones, the Shahid drones in Ukraine. So Iran is actively helping the Russians bomb the living hell out of Ukrainians. Huh?
They say.
They found the drone.
If you take for granted what the Western media say, then they did.
I think it would make sense. yeah.
Not.
I agree
I wouldn't
that.
say for granted.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of disinformation on both sides, but I do think that it would make sense, at least from my perspective, because the U.S. and Europeans have tried to like stop Iran from exporting any of its oil, right? And now Iran, initially under Rouhani, they were trying to like come, and Trump came in and screw that over. The problem now is China is there, and China is very hungry for energy.
Yeah.
Now, imagine if Iran goes in the arms of China. They don't have to give a damn about what the US says or what Europeans care about. They don't have to give a damn about human rights. And if that happens, Afghanistan is lost. You have three powers, one of them who arrests journalists, one of them who puts Muslims into camps, and Russia who puts both journalists and Muslims into camps. Human rights is done. We're abandoning the Central Asian nations because look at a map. There's no way to get to them. And their energy and as well as their people, right? So they're lost. And you have an ally that's inimical to human rights who you can't really have a hold on that controls access to Qatar and the Persian Gulf. You have Chinese ships right there. So even if you should care about the Iranian people, but even if like that isn't a concern for you, for the future of Europe and Germany, if you want to see human rights in Asia, if you don't want to lose Asia completely, this is the moment. You have to pay attention to this fight.
Yeah, exactly. I think, I think that the Islamic regime has been best friends with Russia and China. And of course, like the Islamic regime will help China with whatever they need. This is kind of like a pact. The three of them come together. But if the Islamic regime is gone, I think there will be an opportunity for us to fight for humanity, as you mentioned.
Absolutely, So, as this interview draws to a close, maybe just I think we've already given a detailed idea of what your organization does. Maybe just talk about how we can get in touch with you. And actually, more importantly, I think it'd be great if you could tell our listeners what they can do in their own capacity to support this revolution that's happening in Iran.
Of course. Well, there are a lot of stuff that they can help us with, and we have an email address that it would be super awesome if people can write to us and tell us. I mean, we have a lot of roles.
It's feminista.berlin.
No. It's contact@feminista.group.
Okay. Contact@feminista.group.
Exactly. Okay. And people can just simply write to us and tell us that they want to help, and we will have something for you. Either it's even like translating letters to German, to English, or I don't know, helping us set up the camp, or helping us with the demonstrations that are happening here in Germany.
Yeah, and they have protests all over the world, right? So
exactly.
I mean, find a local protest and please go there. I mean, you're going to get inspired, even if you're not. I remember I was sitting there, like, just admiring the protest. I look Iranianish, I can be mistaken for Iranian. And people, I just pointed to myself, oh, Hindustani hum. Like, I'm Indian. Like, no worries, I can't understand you. But go there. I mean, it's really amazing. They have music. They have, like... By the way, where do people find all these 1979 flags? There must be like a very rich store owner in Berlin just selling these huge Shah flags.
Yeah.
And listeners, if you are in possession of a 1979 Shah of Iran flag, please send it to cluboscars@gmail.com. We would love one for our collection. So yeah, please attend these demonstrations. Your presence is welcome there.
Yes, of course. And Wafa Mustafa, who's a Syrian who was also with us at Feminista's camp, she had this sentence that says, we're not free until all of us are free.
Mm.
And I think this should be a motto for all of us. So
We're not free
we're-
if all of us aren't
exactly. So I'm sure that a lot of us are affected by the Islamic regime of Iran, and we don't know about it yet. So yeah, we will appreciate all of your helps.
free. That's wonderful. And they can reach you, I think, just one more time, your email,
Contact@feminista.group.
contact@feminista.group. And you can reach them at Instagram and
Of course, and Twitter, yeah,
feminista.berlin.
feminista.berlin.
Well, Naz, thank you so much.
Of
and
course,
good
thank you
luck
for having me.
in your fight for freedom, for Azadi.
Thank you.